Welcome, everyone. I'm Gaby Hinsliff. I'm a Guardian journalist, and I am your chair for this session, which promises to be absolutely fascinating. We've been discussing all day whether another vote is possible, but what we want to focus on this time is whether another campaign is possible. What lessons can be learned from Remain's failure last time to prevail? We've heard a lot today about how a second vote shouldn't sound just like a rerun of the first one. But how, in practice, is it going to sound distinctive and new? What are the messages? How is it going to engage more people than last time? What's the role for all of you in this room, really, I guess, people who would want to campaign and join in from the grassroots? And to discuss all of this, we're joined by a fantastic panel, starting at my far left. Paul Hilder is Chief International Officer of ProudPAC, Platform for New Politics, which he co-founded with Steve Hilton. Sat next to him, we have Lord Adonis, Labour peer and a very well-known pro-European campaigner. On my right, James McGrory, Director of the People's Vote campaign and former advisor to Nick Clegg. And on my far right, no reflection on her position, Eloise, Todd, CEO of the not at all far-right Best for Britain, which is campaigning to stop Brexit. And to get us started thinking about this, I want to ask all of our panel, really, what, if there was one thing that they could change from last time, apart from the result, what one thing would you change? And James, I'm very unfairly going to start with you.
I think it's probably the one thing everyone can agree in is that it needs to be a completely different campaign from last time. And I think we'll need to do many more than just one thing differently. But to not bore everyone, I will just pick one. And I think it's been demonstrated today, and that is the voice and the role for young people in a future referendum campaign. You've seen so many of these brilliant campaigners today, and I work with them every day in our office, from OFOC and FFS and other groups. And these are the people who certainly going to have to live with the consequences of Brexit the longest, of the outcome of any future referendum campaign, and are overwhelmingly in favour of us staying in the European Union and are as passionate about this. And part of getting young people involved, I think, would also change the culture. I think last time was a fairly traditional, 1990s campaign with sort of high-level political figures at the top, centralised, command and control, and actually, let 1,000 flowers bloom, but particularly use the dynamism, the passion and the creativity of young people to campaign in the way that they want to campaign on their own futures.
Eloise.
Get off your phone. It's very rude.
I'm not on my phone. I'm making notes.
Eloise, we touched there on the question of the fact the last campaign was led by some sort of very well-known political faces. It was perhaps a more traditional kind of campaign. Is there anyone you'd like to lock in a cupboard for next time?
Well,
big cupboard.
I'd like to answer your first
maybe a whole
question
room
that you were going to ask all of the panel. There are a few candidates for sure, but it would be impersonal for me to answer that bit. Answers that maybe the audience can say their suggestions for the cupboard when they take the floor before they ask their question. That's what I'm going to put it back on you. There you go, that's my contribution.
Neatly done.
In terms of the one thing we need to do differently, we have to be really, really hard on ourselves to look at who are the people whose minds we need to change, and who do they need to hear from? What are their lives like? It's all right us gathering and thinking, well, I think, let's do a bit on this, let's do a bit on that, let's, what issue, what's in the news? We can all think we're campaign geniuses, but actually, my family is scattered between Hull, Nottingham and Newcastle, beautiful golden triangle of Midlands and Northernness. And, what are on those people's minds when they're thinking, well, which way will I vote? And there are obviously some Leave people in my communities and in my circle, in my family. Not many. They've been converted. I wouldn't really be able to do this job if I couldn't persuade some people. But what's really on their minds? And that means getting the best data available, knowing where those people live, knowing who they're going to listen to. And it's absolutely fundamental. We all talk about the take back control. What's our take back control? We definitely need a strong strapline and a good message for the air war. But each of those different groups, different communities, have their own messages that they need to hear. And unless we understand that, and unless we localize these campaigns and unleash the brilliant armies of people on the ground, but not only you brilliant people that have been working to change people's minds, to listen to their concerns, but also we need to embed ourselves in, one of the reasons we work with Hope Not Hate, for example, they are embedded in their communities, often leave communities. So it's not just a, hello, I believe in Remain and I'd quite like to, I've come on a train from London, I'd like to change your mind. No, they're already there. And they're already absolutely knowing who the right people are in the parties, in the communities, in the local youth groups and all of that. So we need to find the people that are already there, that are already networked in that community, bring them on board, and frankly, give them the power that they need to make that change and persuade people locally.
Thanks very much for that, Eloise. Andrew, what's the one thing you would change about last time if you could?
Well, you introduced this session by saying there were 3 campaigners plus Lord Adonis.
Oh,
so
that wasn't me. That wasn't me. I didn't say that.
I assume that being one of these rarefied aristocrats, I don't do any campaigning. But I do occasionally do meetings and get out and about. And alas, to our huge regret, the services of David Cameron, George Osborne and Craig Oliver are not going to be available for this referendum campaign. So that's going to be one very big difference that I think counts in our favour. But of course I agree with everything that James and Eloise have said, particularly we will win this referendum, in my judgment, if the young mobilise the young. I mean, just that, and nothing else changing, will dramatically change the situation. But what can I add to it, which is my experience going up and down the country and my reflection on the referendum 2 years ago? We have got to have a profoundly, passionately committed pro-European campaign this time. We cannot be apologising for the very organisation that we want to be a part of, which is what undermined us. David Cameron could barely bring himself to say the word Europe in the last referendum campaign. This time we have to. We have got to be much more passionate about staying in the European Union than the other lot are about leaving it. And that wasn't the case 2 years ago, and we need to make it the case this time. And that isn't just about the economic side and all of that, though that's important. We've got to make a profound argument about our national identity, our solidarity across Europe, the kind of society that we want to build, and crucially, the importance of the European Union as the most powerful and important agent for peace in the history of civilization. And if we get... and then, final point, Caroline Lucas's brilliant speech this morning, a copy of that should be sent to every voter across the UK, and then we'll be fine.
Thank you very much. Steve, I suppose, as the one of this panel who was possibly least directly involved last time, you come at this with slightly fresh eyes. What would you...
very sweetly called me Steve there.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm actually not working...
I know, I was thinking of your business partner. I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's a complete brain malfunction.
Steve's over there wearing the hat, by the way.
For the avoidance of doubt...
That's not the Steve I was thinking of.
I am not Steve Hilton, nor am I currently working with him. We closed that chapter some time ago. I'm now working on things like breaking up Facebook and beating Steve Bannon in the European elections. So get ready for tell them again. Tell them again. Tell them again. Tell them again. When I met with Will Shaw in January of 2016, he told me that the key voter group they were going to focus on was soft Tory Eurosceptics. And I said, there's this group of voters, working class voters in Labour areas, who are really pissed off with the status quo and want to give the establishment in Westminster a bloody nose. So you might want to think about focusing on them. He didn't think they were going to turn out, but they did. Then I went and saw Matthew Elliott, who was running the Vote Leave campaign. I said, what do you think turnout's going to be? He said, not that high, actually, under 50%. But Dominic knew who the voters were who are going to decide the outcome of that referendum. So let's learn that lesson for starters. Who are the voters who are going to decide the outcome of this referendum? And it's not just the young. The young are important, but I think there are 5 groups. There's some of those soft Tories who are worried about the economic risks, for sure. Then the other 4 groups are all anti-establishment. There's working class, principally Labour voters. There is the young voters who, again, principally voting for Jeremy Corbyn at the last general election, very anti-establishment. You know, the system isn't working for them. I'll talk to any young voter about whether they'll ever own a house. So that's the third group, right? And you've got the Jeremy Corbyn base, the left, who would really rather have a general election and want to transform the country for the many and not the few. But we've seen how they can mobilize, haven't we, in the last 2017 general election, the power of that engine, and the fact that they got a bigger share of the vote for Labour than anyone since Tony Blair, anti-establishment. And then the 5th group are the nationalists, principally in Scotland, who really want to give Westminster a kicking. And a third of the SNP vote went Leave last time. So the question that I would ask everybody in this movement is, what are the messages, what are the messengers, and what's the organizing model and strategy and campaign that is going to be able to beat Tell Them Again? And my conclusion is that at the moment we are very far from being ready for that. I think we've done a very, very good job of mobilizing the base. And really the lions of this struggle are the Remain campaigners all over this country who have been organizing in their own communities, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Green, none of the above, nationalists, whoever, right? But the reality is still, the effort is being run from Westminster. And it is being run, I'm afraid, by too many of the people who lost the campaign in 2016, and is being run by too many of the people who think that they've been right ever since Tony Blair was elected in 1997, and that Nick Clegg was right to go into government with the Tories in 2010. And these are not the people who are going to be able to persuade the groups of voters who will determine the outcome of the next referendum. I have great appreciation, compassion, and gratitude to everybody who has been doing all of this work in Millbank, everywhere else. But we really need to think new thoughts and bring new leaders to the fore, and this is not just about a few young people getting hot-housed in Millbank Tower.
Thank you for that, which I think was a necessary challenge, perhaps, to a lot of what we've been talking about today. I'd like to, in the spirit of a campaign that involves more people than last time, and that involves letting 1,000 flowers bloom, rather than me banging on, I'd like to take some questions from the floor at this point, as I'm sure there'll be a lot of them. And I'm going to take them in batches of 3, so we get through as many as possible. If you could keep your questions brief, that would really help. Right, there's a lady directly in front of me with the stripes. There's a microphone heading your way. And as I said, I'm going to take these in questions, book up to 3.
My question's very simple. What is the listening channel that the People's Vote campaign has got? The reason I ask is that I spent quite a bit of time trotting around delivering these leaflets before Christmas, and I had some feedback to you about the quality of the leaflet, which I sent. Nobody's replied. So am I sending it to the wrong email address? Or are you only going to talk to experts like him? Because he clearly knows, Paul clearly knows better than me how to market. But is my opinion, or our opinion, worth anything to you in terms of feedback?
Right, got that one. And I saw a forest of hands over there. Gentleman with the elbow patch, I think. Your microphone is heading away.
Yeah, this is possibly a question for Andrew. I've not heard this asked anywhere, but there is the question of the fact of the 29th of March being signed into law. Does not that need to be changed before we can even think about revoking Article 50 or anything like that?
Okay, thank you very much. And gentlemen, sorry, I'm now blinking into the lights, but there is a gentleman at the back who is very urgently waving his hand.
Thank you very much. Peter Kenyon. Simple question, which is, are we hearing enough from businesses and the people whom they employ to get a better impression of just how damaging the Brexit risk is to them and their futures and the future of this country? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So 3 questions there. Are we hearing enough from businesses about the potential damage from Brexit? We have a question about whether the date of the 29th of March for Brexit is movable, and a question on feedback to people's vote and how closely you're listening. I think, Eloise, if I can ask all the panel to come in on which of those they think are relevant to their particular areas. Eloise, can I kick off with you?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, are we hearing from business enough? And one of the things that we definitely aren't, but one of the things that we've been trying to do, a lot of the industry trade associations don't feel able to go against the government, and they've kind of been co-opted. What's really important is to hear from different kinds of industries. So, for example, when the official tech body that's closely aligned to the government said that they would back the government's deal, Tech for UK, an amazing organisation that we're very proud to have helped start up in the last year, got 2,500 CEOs writing a letter saying, no, we don't back this deal, we want a vote. And that kind of thing is really impactful. So we need to help, like the alternative, we need to build the alternative industry associations. We've got them for music, we've got them for TV, we've got them for gaming, and we need to build those for more and more businesses. And that way, we will challenge also the establishment, if you like, of the business trade associations. And that needs to happen locally too.
Andrew, did you want to come in on the mechanics of the...
Shall I take the... Don't worry about that issue. It is true that the 29th of March is in the European Union Withdrawal Act, but it can be changed by order. It requires one vote in both Houses of Parliament to change it. And once it's changed, then all of those provisions are on hold until such a time as a new date is put in place. So I wouldn't worry about that. The bigger issue is the conditions on which we can extend Article 50, and the general view is that we can extend it for the purposes of holding a general election or a referendum, because the European Union, being a club of democracy, it respects the internal democratic processes of its member states, and that would be granted, but they would not grant an extension just for yet more dither, which, of course, is what Theresa May might want to do in order just to kick the can down the road. So what we should focus on very clearly is that the only way out of the crisis which the country now faces after Theresa May's deal is rejected next Tuesday is a referendum, because the only way actually of resolving this crisis, there is no other mechanism that's going to resolve it which is likely to have majority support in the House of Commons. And once that's done, everything else will fall into line, all of the technical provisions, and we should have no difficulty at all agreeing with our European partners an extension of Article 50 for the purposes of holding a referendum. In terms of the date of the referendum, what we actually then do, which is a key issue, we need to form a view on that, and there are a lot of different views around, but just one thing I would like to inject into our thinking: it seems to me to be absolutely vital that the referendum is held during school and university term, so that young people can vote very easily. We do not want another referendum at the end of June, when the universities have all broken up and it's much harder for young people to vote, particularly those who are registered at their place of study. And it's also, if it's the case, as I believe, and I hope that many of you will agree, that we should give the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds in this referendum, and that we should automatically register all young people at their place of study, including 16 and 17-year-olds, then it's vital that this referendum is held when young people can actually vote at their place of study. So we need to be thinking, we need to be constantly a step ahead of the game in terms of working out how we should handle this whole referendum campaign so that we get it in a state where actually we can generate maximum participation and not what happened last time, which of course was to seek to minimize the participation, particularly amongst the groups, to be blunt, who are most likely to be keen to stay in Europe because their futures are really at stake.
Paul, can I come to you next on those? Do you want to tackle perhaps particularly the business one? I mean, there's an argument that almost we heard too much from big business during the last campaign. Was that necessarily the most persuasive voice?
Well, and I think that, to be honest, I wish business was being bolder and braver here and not accepting what appears to be the status quo path that we are on towards Brexit, but which is actually driving off the edge of a cliff. I wish they were doing less of that. There's too many people in business who are seeking to accommodate with that and to achieve the softest possible Brexit because they think that will rock the boat the least. I think that all of us actually need, one of the greatest obstacles for us is the fear that people have of reopening Pandora's box. And the reality is, I think, that we do not need to have the same shallow conversation that we had last time. The conversation does not have to be even more poisonous than it was last time, which many people fear. It could be a real, rich, unruly, but inspiring and exciting conversation about what kind of country we want to live in. My view is there is a necessary polarization in a referendum campaign, but there is also a need to reach out across that if we are going, A, to win 60-40, which is what I think we need to be aiming to do, and B, to be able to bring the country back together afterwards. So I feel like there's a lot of shallow thinking, and we need to raise our sights and really think about what Remain and Transform would look like. Forget Remain and Reform. Remain and Transform.
James?
Yes, to the lady who asked about our leaflets. Hard for me to say exactly your specific case because I've only just met, clearly. But you and people like you across the country are the only reason the People's Vote campaign exists and the only reason we've had any degree of success whatsoever. The kind of people who are prepared, rain, shine, snow, quite possibly in the next couple of months, who are prepared to go out and make their case in their own communities to people within their own circles is the only way this is going to work both now and then during any future referendum campaign. And for example, we've got an action day on Saturday where we've got 160, 170 events going on around the country, you know, with people like yourself, the only reason that they're happening. I know that the field team who organise it are always keen to get feedback on leaflets because you, by definition, are the people who are best placed because you can give people the direct reaction from people in your communities. And the other thing that will be interesting is you'll get different feedback from different types of people in different areas, and the field team will then have to kind of work out what that means. In terms of sort of the best way of giving feedback, it's probably generally through the way that you received the leaflets, whether that's through your local group or via email. That generally the best way will be to go through the... Yeah, I mean, the team are pretty backed up. I mean, you know, got a very, very small team trying to, you know, change the future of the country, and if they haven't got back to you on email, I apologise on their behalf, but I should, as their boss, pray in aid and say it's not because they're sat in Millbank with their feet up, it's just because they've got quite a lot on. So I'm sorry we've let you down on this occasion. It's not because we don't value the feedback, it's sometimes there's just too much on our plate. So keep plugging away, I suppose, is probably my best piece of advice, and sorry we've not been speedy enough on this occasion.
Keep plugging away is good advice to campaigners everywhere. Can I take another round of questions? There is a lady at the front in a sort of coral jumper and very nice scarf. There's a microphone rushing towards you.
Thank you. Is it on? Yes. Hi, Claire Clifford. What I feel what we have not seen from anybody in the last 31 months now is an attempt to shift the blame for the reasons that Leave voted Leave from Europe to the current Tory government and austerity and everything else. It's a very simple thing. And the frustration of sort of trying to penetrate the Westminster bubble, who cannot see the wood for the trees anymore, we are still not talking to the people who are pissed off and fed up to the back teeth with the status quo, the Tory status quo. Nobody's explaining the reasons behind Brexit, that they want the free trade deal with the USA and the lowering of standards and all that. These are things that Leavers can take on. They're not stupid, but we are not helping them or helping ourselves.
So is your question, why isn't that aspect?
Why is this not, there's 650 brains in Westminster to start with, very good one sitting in front of me here, but nobody's actually getting the nitty-gritty and getting hold of this and saying...
Thank you. And there was a gentleman in the sort of middle, at the end of his row with glasses, who I am not doing a very good job of describing, but has just grabbed that. Now I'm afraid, sorry, there's too many men in glasses in this room.
Yeah. Can I ask, what is the panel's answer to Paul Hilder's question of what's the reply to tell him again? Including what Paul's view is.
What's the reply, perhaps in a equally concise slogan fashion? I'm not asking for much here. And one more question. At the very back row, there's a lady in a black top, some description.
Yeah, just wondering how we can avoid being sucked back into lots of lies and angry day-to-day rebuttals and setting the agenda. Is it at all possible we could come up with an agreed data set of facts about the consequences of all the options that end up on the ballot paper, that are agreed by all sides, that would stop us having to argue basic facts over and over? And secondly, just asking Paul Hilder about Bannon and Europe, and is he, on the Americans, likely to be a threat again if they get involved?
I'd love there to be an agreed set of facts about Brexit, but I think we might wait a while for those. So 3 questions there. How would another campaign move the argument onto austerity and Tory government, and to what extent it's responsible for problems that people may be driving people to vote Leave? What's your best response to tell them again, preferably in 3 words? And is it possible for us to have to avoid getting bogged down in he said, she said, rebuttals arguing over basic facts? Since a couple of you mentioned, Paul, I'm going to come to you first on those, Paul, perhaps particularly on the first one.
Yeah, well, Bannon is who he is, and he'll make all the trouble he can. He's mainly focused on the continent right now, although he still has lots of friends over here. He was having a very interesting conversation with the academic Matthew Goodwin in a luxury hotel in London not long ago about data and polling and those sorts of things. You have to craft messages carefully based on data and conversations. I haven't crafted a message for this yet. I think For the Many is a bloody good message. It's one of the strongest messages we've had in the last 20 years in this country. Actually, the Blairites used it first. But I think Jeremy Corbyn gave it more meaning and substance. I think that there needs to be a message of change at the heart of this next Remain campaign. This is why I said Remain and Transform, although I don't think that's the antidote to tell them again. And I think that frankly, I think that if the Labour front bench gets itself to the place where it can start making the case that you were describing, which it is uniquely placed to make, and has every reason to make, because the electoral case for Labour of moving deliberately, carefully, wisely towards the position that all the people in this room would share is becoming overwhelming, and they've seen that data.
Well, I'm aware that the time's up sign is flashing, so I'll ask the rest of the panel to be brief. But yes. Andrew, do you want to come in on that one, particularly perhaps on the question of the Labour, of moving the argument onto a attacking government, which would be rather difficult in a cross-party campaign, I'd imagine.
Well, we have got to have our answer to the 3 Farage slogans. We can already see where he's going, which is leave means leave, tell them again, and just get on with it. Now, just get on with it, I think we should appropriate ourselves, because we want to just get on with the people's vote. That's what we want to get on with, and the sooner the better. But on the other 2, the ones that seem to come to me to come through very strongly, though we need better words probably, we've got to, a big and compelling message that this time is save Britain from Brexit, because we can actually see what Brexit is this time. 2 years ago we couldn't see, and as we can see, it's quite clear that the 6 weeks of medical supplies, the trashing of the economy, the border in Ireland, all those things, as people can see it, they like it less and less. But we do also need a really powerful message on the stay and transform. And I thought the themes that Caroline was setting out this morning are absolutely right. And just one final thought to leave you with. By far the most viewed video that the Remain campaign did 2 years ago was Gordon Brown. I'm sorry we're not supposed to talk about figures from the past, but Gordon Brown, who was a former Prime Minister you might have heard of, he did a video in Coventry Cathedral, in the ruins of Coventry Cathedral, very passionate, under the slogan, lead, not leave, with the big themes of peace, solidarity, the rebuilding of Europe, and so on. That went viral. It was then closed down by David Cameron, who didn't want any of this stuff about, the positive case for Europe and all that. My view is lead, not leave, Britain's destiny to be part of Europe, to play our part in Europe, so that we don't have a recurrence of the horrors of the past. I think we need a lot more of that in the referendum campaign this year.
Sorry, Eloise, I'm going to ask you some quick thoughts on that, and then James, and then we really must wrap up. But
yeah, I don't think we have our magic answer to tell them again just yet, but we need to, I concur with what Andrew said and with what Paul said, we need to have our strong message. We need to encapsulate the idea that we change Britain and change Europe, and we need to be bold in that prospect. And the truth is that actually most of the people that have been shifting from Leave to Remain that position are working class Labour voters, and the trick will be to inspire them and get them out. So not only do we need Jeremy Corbyn to swiftly table that motion of no confidence next week when we, touch wood, the deal is voted down, we not only need him to move swiftly to backing a public vote, but we need the leadership of the Labour Party and all of the Labour Party to take on the challenge and actually make a passionate case for changing Britain, and it's only possible if we don't have the absolute bind of Brexit that will stop our country from succeeding.
James?
Yeah, I think there's universal agreement that we need a strong message, but yet we've yet to find them. So, answers on a postcard would be hugely appreciated. But in answer to the lady's question here, I can totally see that's an incredibly compelling message for a lot of people that I don't think has been articulated very well over recent months and years. But it's also not a message that works for everybody. There's plenty of, for example, Conservative voters who we would need to support us in a future referendum campaign who would find that message rather unappealing. You need, I think, a range of different message carriers talking to a range of different people with the messages that have been tested to work for them. But I agree with you, if you're asking for a serious bit that's been missing, and I think that's probably because the formal position of the Labour Party, of course there are people across the Labour movement doing amazing things within our campaign, that they are, as Paul said, uniquely placed to provide that kind of message.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of our panel for your contributions. Thank you for some fantastic questions, and hope you enjoy the last session of today.